Welcome back, everybody, to Buzz City Breakdown. I'm Owen. That's Albert. To the left of me, we write for the Charlotte Hornets on SI website. You can find our work over there. You can also find us on YouTube over here 5 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. Right now is the schedule. You can see it on the bottom line down there. You can also find us on Spotify by looking up Buzz City Breakdown. Leave 5 stars over there. Follow us over there. It's always appreciated. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube show. It's the only thing we ask for. It's the only thing that really helps us. You know, your comments always help too. I should say that. But your watch time always helps too. I should say that. But more than anything, the subscription and that like button, that good old thumbs up, you know, that helps more than anything. So we appreciate you guys that do that. If you think you are, double check. It's always appreciated. Other than that, Albert and I are going to get to some mailbag questions today. You guys left some on Twitter. There was a couple on the YouTube comments. We got some from Matt Alkiza, who I'm very appreciative, asked a couple really good questions. There's one question left over from last week from you feller that won't let me say your name because of what it is on Twitter, but you left a bunch of questions last week, so we pulled one from your pile over there, and we'll answer one over there from you. We got one from Nate. We got one from It's Adolphus. And I think that's it today. We got 5 questions, but 5 good ones today. So with that said, all the house cleaning, sweeping is out the way. And, you know, I got the dustpan, dumped it in the trash, and now I got to get to my buddy Albert. How you doing, friend?
Doing pretty good. I'm a bit tired, I will admit, and
I was about to say pretty good. You know, was a bit melancholy, I feel.
no, I'm still pretty good. I won't be held back by not enough sleep, let's say that. But also the pre-show taking forever because of technicalities and stuff like that. But we're here now. This episode has started, and we're gonna finish it. At least when you see this on YouTube, we will have finished it. If you don't see this, then I'm afraid for what's about to happen. But otherwise, I'm pretty optimistic.
Otherwise, not just pretty good, but pretty optimistic, he says as well. So I will say for tomorrow's show, Musa Diabate just did a podcast. Something I'll say this again at the end of the show, but probably something we'll talk about tomorrow. Brandon Miller had quotes with Rod Boone that we want to talk about today, but this is mailbag day, so we'll save that for tomorrow. We'll probably talk a little bit about Musa's comments as well as some of the stuff Brandon said about his shoulder and the offseason and all the things in between. So that'll probably be tomorrow's episode for what that's worth. You guys wonder why we haven't discussed that stuff yet. So that'll be tomorrow's episode. But today, starting with Nate J84, to be more specific with the at in front. He says, I want to know, will building a team of primarily 6 men and some bench role players work? Kobe was the 6th man. Naz was the 6th man. Moose would be a 6th man on a team with a starting caliber center. The other white boy from Duke is a 6th man. You must be a North Carolina fan. O'Neal, Grant, Sion, Schroeder are all bench level role players. With the tease at the North Carolina fan of it all out the way, this is a great question. This is a really, really good question. And the only hole I'm going to poke in it to start is the only, you know, if this were a math equation, I think, you know, you'd be, if you were a physicist, you got this equation that Nate just put out on the board, right? And you're like, wow, the math really adds up there. But you forgot a variable, and the variable is Brandon Miller. And the problem with Brandon Miller is, like a lot of things in math and especially physics, you know, it's a very unknown constant right now, Brandon Miller. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know the weight of his variable. We don't know how to calculate into the calculus of our, you know, equation here in terms of, is this going to work? But I think the way you're thinking is incredibly fair, because on paper, that's a great point. You know what I mean? And 2 of those guys that you're talking about are high-level 6-men. 3, really including Moose, like you said, will be the starters. But the main turning point here that could change the whole thing, like I said, is absolutely Brandon Miller. And then Con Knipple, too, to a lot of extents. You know, will he take a jump this year? Will the being higher on the scouting report of it all affect him more than we either expect or he expects? You know, how does he adjust to that? Those 2 things really matter, because outside of the 6-man bench player of it all, these guys are incredible role players for a reason. They are incredibly hardworking players, hustle players. You know, they fit the DNA. They're the culture fit. So, and on top of that, Kobe, Moose, and Naz, I think the Hornets are betting on those guys, all 3, having room to still up their games on a roster that is, you know, talented in a way that someone like Kobe's never had before, at the very least. What do you think, Albert?
Yeah, well, I I understand the sentiment of this question, but I do have to say that some of these guys here, they are starters. Kobe White started for the Bulls for about 2.5 years before he was traded to the Hornets. that Bulls team wasn't good, sure enough, but he started for them. Naz would have probably started for the Timberwolves if they hadn't had Karl Anthony Towns at first and then Julius Randle, who they traded for. Royce O'Neal has started in his career plenty of times. Grayson Allen started for the Suns in his first season there, I think. He definitely started for the Bucks when he was there a couple of years ago with Giannis. And so, are any of these guys, the third best player in the starting lineup ever, or have they ever been the third best player in any starting lineup? Probably not. But they are all complementary starters. I think that's what you have to keep in mind, first of all. These aren't all sixth men. Sure, Grant is really a career sixth man. Sion so far has been a sixth man. Schroeder has started in his career, but is also more of a sixth man, definitely. But Kobe White and even someone like Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, those are starting caliber players, in my opinion, as long as you don't rely on them to be the guys carrying the heavy load for you. And they've shown that over the past couple of years, that they can be the fourth best guy on a starting lineup. They don't need to take a ton of shots. They don't need to, take up a lot of the usage, but they can function as those guys that just hit shots, defend perfectly fine. And what more can you really ask for? Moussa Diabate, I think, you can say would be a sixth man on a team with a starting caliber center, but that's really kind of unfair to him. He was the starting center on one of the best teams over a certain span of the season last year.
Sure.
It remains to be seen if that was actually a trend, something that was real per se, or if it was just lightning in a bottle. But nevertheless, there's a small sample size where he has shown to be a starting caliber center for sure. And so I'm going to go back to what you said and agree with it. I just wanted to add that I think a lot of these players are actually starting caliber players, but it's going to come down to Brand Miller and Concnable, really. If they can just be... Brand Miller needs to be the best player on this team, and Concnable probably needs to be the second best player when it comes to scoring, simply. And then when you have Moussa and Naz and Royce O'Neal, for example, around those guys, or Kobe White, or Grayson Allen, then you're in a pretty solid spot. Because again, those guys have played that role before. They have been the starters on a team where they were the guy taking the fourth most attempts per game. And they are happy with that. They'll live with that. And so in that sense, I wouldn't be too worried. I understand being concerned if you believe that Brand Miller and Concnable can't be the first and second option. Because then, yes, you're running into a problem where you have a lot of guys that are complementary starters, but you don't really have anyone who can lead a team in scoring, lead a team in facilitating. So in that sense, I understand the concern, but I would say keep in mind that these guys, some of these guys mentioned here, have started before or would have started, as in Naz Reid's case, if there hadn't been such a strong level of competition.
That's a fair point. And I think, last thought here to Nate's defense is, I think we all have at some point talked about, can Moose be a starter on, a really good team in the Eastern Conference? That's been a conversation discussed before. Naz was a sixth man on a Western Conference Finals team, and Kobe was the sixth man for this team last year, when they were playing their best. So, in that sense, I do absolutely understand the sentiment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nate's question. But your point about the others is absolutely right. We talked about Royce O'Neal specifically as the first one that comes to mind. The amount of 10 different playoff series, I think, is what I said for Royce O'Neal. Started, I believe, in every single one of those games, if I'm not mistaken, that he's played in the playoffs in the past. So, to your point there, that's absolutely true. Grayson Allen has absolutely been a starting caliber player before, and I think, this is they got rid of LaMelo for a reason. This is not a heliocentric team anymore. This is a win by committee team, and they have added a ridiculous amount of guys who are really good at winning by committee, and I think that's really the approach more than anything. So let's jump into the next question here from Mr. Swingen. A question I pulled from the leftovers of his residual questions last week. So thank you for asking all those, buddy. I hope you're watching. I hope you've seen them. We're still getting to some of these, so thank you. This is about Liam McNeeley. Won't spend too long on this question, but I do think it is a good question to set the expectation at the proper point for Liam McNeely. So he asked, "Do you think Liam McNeely ever becomes a 20 a game scorer in the future? I think if not on the Hornets, he absolutely can one day somewhere. He was always a steal." Um, I don't want to poo-poo on the question because I just don't think it's realistic for Liam. I don't it would take the moment he gets on the court this year, like he just has to play just like he did in summer league, like taking advantage of every opportunity he's got the ball, getting to the line more often, and like he did that in summer league, but that's not going to be what he's asked to do with the Hornets this year. And given what he will be asked to do for the Hornets when he plays, like guys can get better when they go to other teams, but normally when a guy gets spends multiple years preparing himself to play a rotational player role, he tends to remain in that rotational player role the rest of his, more often than not, at the very least. It's not always the case, but I'd say more often than not. By the time we're projecting Liam maybe next year to be a regular, constant, you're a part of our rotation and what we're doing moving forward instead of being on the back end of what we're looking at like he is this year. So I also want, in terms of setting the expectation, 20 points per game is not easy to do. Okay, I think and this is not just you, Mr. Swinging, but everybody, like, scoring is getting higher, but scoring 20 points a night is still really difficult. So I went to stats here and I pulled a list of, I'm not sure how many guys this is, but I grabbed every guy from the NBA last year. No games, restrictions, no nothing, just straight up averaged anywhere from 20 points even to right at 21 points a game. Okay. Jimmy Butler averaged 20 points even last year. Karl Anthony Towns, 20.1 points per game last year. LaMelo Ball, 20.1 points per game last year. Desmond Bane, 20.1. Bam Adebayo, the second best player ever, 21.1 points per game. Right? Brandon Miller, 20.2 points per game last year. Dylan Brooks, 20.2. AD, 20.4. Şengün, 20.5. Hero, 20.5. Wagner, Franz, 20.6. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 20.8. Shaedon Sharpe, 20.8. Man, fast recovery. Prayers up for Mr. Shaedon Sharpe and his ACL. Is awful to see. LeBron
Meniscus,
James,
I believe.
Meniscus, yes. Knee injury. Just awful to see that as good as he played last year. 20.8 points per game. They were real excited for Shaedon Sharpe. But LeBron, 20.9. Zion Williamson, 20 points. 21 points even. So, regardless of clowning on Zion or, what have you, or how old LeBron is, like, there is not a single player outside of maybe Desmond Bane who you could be like, he's not one of a team's focal points in terms of moving forward. Yeah, Dylan Brooks and Desmond Bane are like the low end crop on this list, and even then, teams have actively sought out the services of Desmond Bane and Dylan Brooks for a reason. You know what I mean? And this is no disrespect to Liam, but getting even close to that would mean he's hit the higher potential version of his ceiling, and not that he can't hit that, I just don't know that he's going to have the opportunity and the reps to like show he's capable of doing that on a night in, night out basis. Do you agree, Albert?
I think it's, let's say, more possible than, for example, for Sion, right? And I feel like that's where this question comes from. If you look at Sion James or Ryan Cockburn or any of these other not conquerable recent draft picks, even, let's say, Hannes Steinbach, someone we haven't seen play yet at the NBA level. I think Liam has a relatively to Sion and Ryan a good shot at scoring 20 a game at some point. But I would say still the percentage, the probability that it happens is probably at around 5%. It's definitely relatively low. We've seen him take a step forward in the Summer League, a big step. And I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say, he comes out this year and he averages 7 points when he gets the chance to play. And that would be a big step forward again for him. But getting to 20 would take some time, surely. I would assume at least 3 years. Probably more so like 4 or 5. And I also can't really see it happen with the Hornets. The way this Hornets team is constructed, you have Brent Miller, you have Conquerable, you have Hannes Steinbach, Christian Anderson Jr., a lot of young guys who they are betting on and who they want to score the ball eventually. And Naz Reid, Kobe White. So there's a lot of shots, a lot of field goal attempts already being claimed by other guys, especially in the future once Christian Anderson Jr. and Hannes Steinbach get better. So I don't see the necessary shot attempts becoming available with the Hornets for Liam. But I could see him go to, let's say, the Pelicans. I mean, who knows what the Pelicans
fair example,
are looking like in 5 years' time or 4 years' time. But I could see him go to another team that is currently tanking or not in a great position, and they
like a Memphis looking for scores type situation.
They just want to grab someone who still has upside, and they maybe give up a good pick for him or something like that. I could see him work for that kind of team. I still think 20 points is not all that likely, but it's possible. If you would have asked me the same question with the Sion, I would have said it's not possible.
Before we move on to the next one here, to the point of your question, like, I do agree with Albert in the sense that if he were to go elsewhere, I think it's plausible. It would depend on the situation. I again agree with Albert in the sense that it'd have to be the right situation, probably a team that's looking to lose. Maybe Chicago could potentially make sense, a team that's probably closer to being better than the Memphis and New Orleans of the world. But again, it's just not here on the Hornets roster, I don't think, for Liam. And, to that point, I think another team could see that. I think Liam is one of Charlotte's better trade pieces. Like, if it comes down to it and they are trying to move off of Tijon Salon, I can almost guarantee you that teams are going to ask for Liam McNeeley as a part of the return package to take on Tijon, because teams are, I would be, at least, like, there's still a lot more there for Liam as compared to Tijon, and in my opinion, a lot more hope at the very least that he can contribute at a sooner point in time. So I do understand your point. Great question. Thank you for asking, sir. Let's go to Mr. It's Adolphus, common commenter. Pretty good to have you back, sir. I should say that. I hope you're grieving the loss of Trey Mann in a proper way, in the way that suits you best. Let us know the update on the player that you've chosen to be your new Trey Mann, for what it's worth. But Mr. It's Adolphus asked us about Grant Williams. He says, what do you think the franchise will do in terms of Grant? In terms of short extension of 2 years / trade, because Grant's an expiring, he helps winning so much and is basically the mayor of the city, right? Basically. And obviously he does that impact the development of the other guys? If we see Hannes as a 4, then Grant as the backup 4 pushes him to the third power forward. If Hannes is a 5, then the 4 depth is really Naz, Grant, Royce at times, and then Salon, right? Definitely a dilemma. I wouldn't worry too much about Grant. I think I'm more worried about Tijon than I am about Grant Williams, because
you're worried about Tijon? In what way?
In terms of, like, the roster going forward, like, Grant is going to play this year and be fine, even if he struggles at points. But, like, Tijon, I don't know if that's going to be the case at all.
That's the point. Do you still believe there's a possibility that will be the case?
Not really.
I'm way past the point of worrying. I thought we both were.
Oh, well, I knew you were, but I told you back in a month or more ago that I still was holding out the teeniest bit of hope, but like that has gone from the teeniest bit to like a complete sliver that I'm holding on to for dear life, and with the strength of Spider-Man as before the season starts. But that's all I meant in terms of comparing him to Tijon. But I think Grant is a good enough player. I don't think they're going to trade him until if they did, it'd be at the deadline, and it'd be because he wasn't contributing, or because Tijon proved us wrong and decided to contribute at a very high level. If that happens with Tijon, I could see them moving off Grant at the deadline. But I think even if they decide to keep him, I don't think they're going to sign him to an extension right now. They're going to let this season play out. They're not going to commit money to Grant. I don't think it. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. I could see them doing it, but I think I would lean towards not committing money, even if it's just for 2 years, to Grant right now, because it really and truly, if Grant, if we get past the extension deadline, past the trade deadline, and Grant's still a Hornet and he's moving into unrestricted free agency, I think there's still a really high chance he's coming back to Charlotte. Let him see his market, but I think you would want to be back in Charlotte. And then at that point, you have the leverage of seeing if he gets money that you don't want to pay elsewhere, and then it's somebody else's fault because they paid something you didn't want to for him. So, if Tijon's not playing, because Here's the thing. Moving off Grant, to me, I don't know that you can move off Grant by himself. I could be wrong about that, but I think you'd have to put just one other person. Now Trey's gone now, and I think that guy has to be either Liam or Tijon. And I don't know that you're going to move off of those two guys by the deadline. So I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on this. I could see it going a lot of different ways, but I lean towards they're going to keep him till the end of the year, let him become an unrestricted free agent, and then my second option that I think would happen most would be moved at the deadline because Tijon, was awful, and they're trying to get another competent power forward in as a reliable backup behind Naz, and to have Royce there as well. What do you think?
I wouldn't worry too much about where the minutes are going to come from for everybody in the front court, because after all, a lot of the front court guys that they have right now are very matchup dependent. There will be nights where Ryan Cockburner basically can't play a single minute. He maybe plays 4 or 5. And then you have Musa, who has shown a lot of struggles against certain types of bigs. You have Naz, who you now entrust with playing a bigger role, but we're yet to see how that plays out. We're yet to see how Hannes Steinbach looks on an NBA floor or NBA court. And so you will definitely, especially in the first, let's say, 8 weeks of the season, have nights against opponents where Steinbach maybe looks bad in the first half. Ryan Cockburner or Moussa Diabate, one of those isn't playable because of the matchup. And then you need someone to fill in at the 4 spot. You don't want Grant Williams playing the 5 at this point, I think, but he is a very solid option. He will rarely turn the game around for you, but he's obviously very reliable in what he does, and you know what you're going to get from him. He's not some sort of Wundertüte, you say in German, a mixed bag. You don't know what you're getting out of him. You definitely do know what you get out of Grant Williams, and so just keep him along for, even if it's sometimes only 8 minutes a game, and sometimes I'm sure it will be 20 minutes a game, because again, the matchups and the inexperience for Hannes, the new role for Naz. This frontcourt is really the opposite of being set in stone. There's like one big stone, but nothing has been hammered into that stone yet, so you can hammer away and see what happens with it. But they are going to keep him for this season, I think, and I agree with what you said, that there's a pretty good chance that if this season goes relatively well, that he comes back next year and tries to further help the progression of the franchise as a whole. Now, if they play a bad season, whether Grant Williams plays a role in them being bad or not, I could also see a contender making a move for him for cheap, and him maybe wanting to take that experience with him, but that's speculation.
Yeah, and that's the only other point I have to add here about Grant is, like, if Charlotte trades him, like I said, I think they probably have to attach somebody else to make it worth more than one or maybe two second round picks.
I didn't mean per trade. I mean in free agency. So let's say the season goes wrong and he becomes an unrestricted free agent. I could see Cleveland or Philadelphia, someone
for sure
trying to just pick him up for cheap money, and him taking that offer because after all he doesn't have that much left.
Yeah, and here's the thing with Grant is, like, if you trade him, you're like, oh well, we don't want to keep him, we could lose him for nothing. But it's not like this is Brandon Miller, it's not like it's Khan or Kobe, it's not like you're just letting
the return
him walk
wouldn't
for
be
nothing.
great either.
Right, it's, you know what I mean. So I think if they're playing well, or even like hovering around 500 in the middle of the season, the 1 or 2 second round picks they could get back in a potential deal for Grant Williams, even with a player alongside him, is probably not worth what Grant brings to the city of Charlotte, and more importantly, like, to the locker room, the knowledge of the team. He's got a massive basketball IQ, Grant Williams. He's so active in the community, not just in Charlotte, but he's got a ton of foundations. Like, I just think he's more valuable than to move for a flip so you don't lose him for nothing, an unrestricted free agency. So that's why like said that to begin with. I think they're probably willing to take the chance that they could get him back in unrestricted free agency, and he could walk, like you said. But if they have a good season, I think he comes back for sure. So let's move on to last two questions here. First one from Mr. Matt Alkiza at Malkiza8. He says, which lineup combinations are y'all most excited to see? This is a question I had fun with because my lineup is probably completely unrealistic, but it's one that I want to see at least one time. Doesn't have a point guard in it, and that's why I think it's unrealistic. And I will caveat this lineup by saying it is completely dependent on how Brandon Miller develops as a ball handler, both as, just in general and as a primary initiator, pick and roll operator, all the things. Maybe not so much as a passer because of the scoring prowess you'd have out here. But my lineup, Albert, is Brandon Miller, Con Knipple, Naz Reid, Hanez, and Musa. I think Naz is plenty good enough to scoring the ball, to be a real mismatch at the three some nights for some guys. And then, if Brandon Miller is just good enough and Con Knipple is just good enough in their growth as ball handlers, like the offensive rebounding you'd get from Hanez and Musa being on the floor at the same time, I think this lineup would benefit more from their offensive rebounding prowess than if you just took Naz out and it's Royce or Grayson Allen or somebody else out there for those guys. I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how realistic this is, but God, it could be absolutely dangerous. So this is the one I've come up with. Albert, what do you have?
I have three different ones. The first one I have is the starting lineup. Pretty obvious, but we just haven't seen those guys play together. I think it's a very interesting combination of players, so I'm looking forward to that. Then my second one is very similar to yours, but I just went slightly different. I've got Musa, Hannes, Naz, Brandon, and then Kobe, because exactly of what you said. I do not trust the initiation with this lineup. If you put Con and Brandon out there together, of course, either way, it would be very risky defensively to run a lineup out there with three big guys, none of whom are per se great defenders or rim protectors, or have the Musa has a pretty good foot speed.
That's
but
if the other team can get the ball back and actually clear a defensive rebound. You know what I mean?
I mean, they're gonna get it eventually if the Hornets score. So, and then you might get in trouble, I think. But it would be.
What's your third one?
It would be a very fun lineup. And then my third one is Grayson Allen, Brandon Miller, Con Knipple, Grant Williams, and Naz Reid.
Wow.
Something that I think could actually happen, because if you put Grayson, Brandon, and Con out there together, and you even have Naz Reid, there's a lot of, well, not a lot of great initiation around, but there's enough that you can see it work by committee, and there's a lot of intelligence offensively, I think, in this lineup, especially with Grayson Allen, Grant Williams. You have two guys who have spent their whole careers moving around off the ball, and they know where to go so that they can create open three-point shots. And I feel like this lineup, again, really, really shady defensively, but offensively, I think this lineup could be electric. If Grayson and Brandon can create just a few paint touches, and then you get to spray the ball out, and you get the defense moving, and you have a lot of guys who have great understanding for where to move next and where to be offensively. I think this lineup could theoretically create a lot of really, really beautiful possessions.
Now, I'll give one more lineup combination I have that also kind of plays into Matt's last question and our last question in the mailbag up here. My last lineup that I have is Kobe, Con, Brandon, Royce O'Neal, and Naz Reid. I think if we're talking about the lineups on given nights where Charlotte just decides to go like ultra offensive, all out, shoot the lights out. I mean, Kobe, Con, Brandon, Royce, Naz is fun. They're fast. Naz gets out in transition just as well as any guy his size in the league, both with the ball in his hands and not. Royce, has shown he can play there, and like this lineup is going to be a problem for people some nights. It's going to be incredibly switchable despite the defensive issues they'll have, and it gives
I,
you the chance on
you
defense to really gamble, so you can really go for runs, get out in transition, and break
sure.
the backs of teams offensively despite your defensive inefficiencies with this lineup. And to say Matt's question before I go into this Matt's final question here, is talking about how many minutes per game do you think Naz Reid will play at the 5? And that's a big question, man. I don't know what Charles Lee is going to do here. I do think it's going to be some, but to go back to what Albert said about, just the bigs in general, it's going to be incredibly matchup dependent, and I think it's going to be on the nights where, where Albert mentioned nights where Kalkbrenner is just rendered unplayable. Those are the nights where you're going to rely on Naz to be a factor for you for small stretches at a time at the small ball 5. But the good thing for Naz is that he's got the weapons around him to not be, because as a small ball 5, sometimes I think there's a ton of pressure on that guy out there to score the ball and score it well to make it worth it. But Naz can do that and still have so many other options alongside of him to make the scoring prowess even more. What are your initial? I have more thoughts on Naz's center minutes here. I have more specifics, but what are your initial reactions to the thought of minutes per night for Naz playing the 5 spot?
I looked this up on basketballreference.com, and he did play, at least according to their stats, they're always a bit iffy when it comes to positional playing time, so I wouldn't take it for a fact. But he did play a good amount of center minutes for Minnesota, and I mean, I know that he did. I'm not sure he played quite as much as Basketball Reference claims, but he definitely has experience playing as a center. The question is, do you need him to do this? And I don't see that being the case. I think there will be very few nights, let's say about maybe 7, 8 nights a season, where he plays a lot of center. Simply because if there's either foul trouble or the matchup is so bad that you can't play Ryan at all,
Right.
or someone is out injured, then you will have those nights, but I don't think there'll be a lot of them. And then usually on an average night, I'd say you probably see him at the beginning of the season for maybe 8 to 10 minutes as a center. And I feel like they will evaluate how that goes early on and then go from there, because Naz Reid has played a lot of center for the Timberwolves, but that was also a lot of the time,
Out
not
of
exclusively,
necessity.
but it was also against backups. Not always, of course. He definitely played against starting centers as well, but it's a difference to come off the bench and be a backup big, and then you face the Zeke Najis of the league, and now
Sure.
you start and you all of a sudden have to face a really good center every other night. And I mean, it's tough to really classify what counts as playing center, because if he's out there with harness, I think it'll.
Hey, don't change your tune on that when we revisit Zachary Ricochet at the end of the season. Continue.
Yeah, Zachary Ricochet is definitely
Continue.
a very similar player to both Naz Reid and
Continue.
Hannes Steinbach. Yeah, okay. Um, I feel like if he's out there with harness, they obviously won't switch every possession and just go crazy, but I do feel like there will be maybe 5 possessions where harness guards the opposing
Right.
team center, and
Right.
then it's Nas. And so I'm not quite sure how I would classify that, but if you're asking me for minutes where he is clearly obviously the center in a lineup, I would say about 8 to 10 early on, and you go from there and see
Yeah.
how it works out.
No, that's okay. That's really reassuring because I didn't dive into his minutes with the Wolves, and the minutes I came up was roughly 5 to 10. The little blurb I have written down here is it really just depends. For me, I think what you said is true, that they're going to evaluate how it looks at the beginning of the season. The lineups we think this could work with. How does it look in reality against lineups that really are counters to it? and those type of things. I could see a world where it's closer to 5 minutes than 10, but I think between 5 and 10 minutes a night average is going to be the sweet spot for Naz. Even if it goes well and they do it more often than we think, I think that 10 minutes per game average is probably just like maxed out there, because what you said is such a great caveat that more than most other teams, if he's the small ball five, unless he's out there with Royce O'Neal, like I just mentioned, he's going to be with Hannes or he's going to be with Moose. And in those moments, like both of those guys need Naz to be more switchable than other teams would need somebody, say, playing alongside Rudy Gobert, like Naz did, to be you're a four, not our, five. So in those scenarios, it will just be kind of hard to pick out. So I'm kind of leaning closer to 5 minutes the more I talk about it, because there aren't too many options where he is truly, surely, undoubtedly the five. And when he's out there with Moose and Hannes, it's going to be more of a center / rim deterrent / defense by committee that it is. And Hannes could prove that wrong, but I think both of us tend to believe he's more of a four than a five anyways. And that's another thing I have here. That matters a lot too. In those lineups where Hannes is playing alongside Naz, does it lean more so that Hannes looks to be the traditional center in that lineup? Is Naz roaming more? Is he out on the perimeter more? Is Hannes playing drop coverage in those lineups as compared? Like what does that look like? Is Hannes a five or is he a four? Like we still don't really know that. I don't think at least.
Yeah.
Boy, what do you have to say on that before we wrap it up here and get out?
The roster construction isn't kind to Naz playing the five. As you mentioned, if Tijon would be ready to play 12 minutes a night, it would really help.
The amount of times we say if Tijon is just ridiculous, because it's true, but it's frustrating. Continue.
Yeah, because now they are left with Grant, who can play the four alongside Naz, but even then, you're looking at a lineup that is pretty undersized, and you can't really keep anyone in front of you probably with this lineup. You have to really rely on, I guess, switching and rotating so precisely and quickly that it seems impossible. And apart from that, I think with Royce, it's even worse than with Grant. You go even deeper into that direction, or even further. And so if they just had a Jaden McDaniels, it would be easier. But
if
they just had one of the best defensive power forwards in the league, it would be so much easier. Shame that they don't have that. But I still think 10 minutes is realistic, simply because they will want to see to start the season what Naz can do as a starter. He hasn't had that chance a lot yet so far. I think he started about 10 games each year for the Timberwolves, and so they will let him play the five, even if it's next to Royce O'Neal. They also have a bunch of winnable games early on against the Nets or the Wizards, where
ultimately too, it's like the shiny new car situation, right? You're gonna go try it out, see what it's got.
I wouldn't even say it's a shiny new car. I would say maybe it's a car that so far you've only driven it, on the streets where everything, is regulated, and now you're taking it
to see how it does on the highway, on the Autobahn.
No, you're taking it, I don't know, out back, and you're taking it to like the woods or somewhere, and just driving over a bit of a rougher terrain to see what's possible.
Did you just say terrain?
Yeah,
it's terrain. Anyways, continue.
Yes, I wasn't sure. In Germany, you would also say that way. But yeah, I do think it's more so just, it's shiny new car would mean that they know he can do that and they would just want to see him do it again. And I don't think they know he can do it. I just think they have seen him do it in a different role.
It's going to be rough and are willing to go off-roading with him if they need to.
Off-road is exactly what I was looking for. Yeah, they're trying to turn him into an off-road truck.
That's just a great answer and way to end that question. They're trying to turn Naz Reid to an off-road truck. That's just, that's going to do it for Buzz City Breakdown today, guys. Naz Reid is going to be an off-road truck. And it's going to be a great season. Matt, thank you so much for getting that question in here, man. I want to reiterate, thank you guys for listening. As always, I say it so much, I feel like, but I don't take it for granted. Albert doesn't. Thank you guys for being here. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show. Find us on Spotify by looking up Buzz City Breakdown. Leave 5 stars over there. Rate the show. Follow it. You can find us on YouTube Music as well on the playlist part of our channel. You can find the podcast section there, and you can leave a voicemail. I didn't say this in the beginning of the show at the Buzz City Breakdown line, 704-750-9063, anytime. And come visit our show 5 times a week, Tuesday through Thursday, Saturday and Sunday, to hear about Naz Reid, the off-road truck. And we will see you guys next time.
Turning Naz Reid into an off-road truck.
I'm Owen. That's Albert. Naz Reid is an off-road truck, and I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow.
Not yet. See ya.